This is a review of Photo 5 color theory exercise. Go to your folder in Lightroom library. Select any image of your choice. I would select an image that has several colors to manipulate with. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this image because I have some colors that are red, green, some skin tones, and some neutral colors. So in this image, I have adjusted the basic adjustments. So I switched over to Develop module and I've adjusted all these basic adjustments. So from a workflow point of view, first thing you should do is select your correct camera profile of your choice. You may scroll down right away to lens correction and be sure to select the remove chromatic aberration and enable profile correction. Now, if you have a mirrorless camera, it's most likely built in, so you don't have to check the enable profile correction. You will look at the detail tab and apply the appropriate sharpening adjustments that were discussed in the last class. So take a look at sharpening. And then let's go ahead and create a virtual copy, and this virtual copy is going to be adjusted with the different color tools that we have discussed in the lecture. So to create a virtual copy, choose the photo menu, go to create virtual copy. You will notice at the bottom film strip you will have another image and it will have a little corner that is flipped. Notice the corner that is flipped. This is a virtual copy. And on this virtual copy, we will address the different color adjustments that we can achieve by looking at our curve adjustment. So we're going to be working with the curve adjustment on the first virtual copy. Now, just a quick review of virtual copy. Virtual copy basically is a rendition of your original. So this way your original stays as is, and we are going to be working on the virtual copy. In the tone curve, we will click on the luminance button. Be sure not to work in the general curve adjustment, the parametric curve adjustment. Work in the point curve or the luminance curve. Okay, so in this curve, in the luminance, we can flatten our blacks if we just scroll up the wall. Now I suggest to only do very minor adjustment here. We can also adjust our highlight, so we can either dim the highlights or we can increase the highlights. Again, don't do too much here, but you can dim the highlights a little bit if your highlights are too strong and you want to create more of a mood. That is up to you, but don't overdo it. Look at these numbers down below. 255 is pure white and 0 is pure black. As you can see, I moved my shadows up by about 6. I moved my highlights down by about 10. Now you can also create single points here. So this area of the histogram is our highlights. All the way on the top right is our whites. So we have whites, highlights, midtones are right in the middle here, and shadows are right in between the midtone and the black. So if you wanted deeper shadows, you can darken your shadows. Okay, so this is actually still dealing with contrast. Now you can always create a slight S-shaped curve and you will have nice level of contrast. What you don't want to do here is create a roller coaster. Don't do things like this. And you'll see that right away because it will look bad. So I'm going to reset this curve. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can literally pull, whoops, maybe not pull. Let's reset it by clicking on custom and let's choose linear. That's one way of resetting it. So I'm going to drag up my blacks just a tiny bit. I'm going to pull down on my highlights just a little bit. Then that is my whites rather. I'm going to move my highlights slightly up. I'm going to move my shadows just slightly down. So there we go. So this is a contrast adjustment. Now I'm going to deal with the color. So red. If I click on red, I will adjust my reds, my cyans. If I click on green, it will be green, magentas. Blue, it will be blues, cool tones, warm tones. So that's what I want to do here. So in the warm tone, in the cool tone area, I'm going to click again on the bottom point of my curve, and I'm going to make my shadows a little bit bluer because that's the effect that I want. And then I'll click on my highlights and make my highlights a little bit warmer. So this is the effect that I'm getting. Now I'm overdoing it a little bit so you guys can see it on the video, but this is the effect I'm going for. And then maybe just a little bit in the greens. Okay, in the greens, what I'm going to do is just bring in a tiny little bit of, well, sometimes, okay, so if I'm going to bring in a little bit of magenta, it's looking very pink. So then I'll go ahead and bring my green shadows back up. There we go. So now we kind of have this washed out look. Okay, that is just a look. That is just a style. It's just an example. You decide what you want to do in this curve. So let's leave this one alone. I'll go back to my original image. Here's my original image. This is my adjusted image. This is my original image. And I'm going to go ahead and create another virtual copy. So I'm going to click on Photo, Create Virtual Copy. Okay, on this virtual copy, I'm going to adjust my color using HSL. I'm going to click on my HSL. I have my hue, I have my saturation, I have my luminance. So in the hue, I might take my reds and make them a little bit more orange. I can also target adjust. I can click on the little button, which is, I call it the donut. I can literally click on the red, move my mouse down or up, and you'll notice that my red and oranges are changing. So I'll go ahead and make it a little bit more purple. Now to do this, you must activate your mouse. Don't let go of your mouse. Okay, so that is good. And then I might also click on his shirt, and as you can see, I can now just change the color of his shirt. So I want his shirt to be less green and more blue. So I'll go ahead and move it up to blue. Notice my aqua is changing. Now I'll take a look at the saturation, and I can do the same thing. I can either move the sliders or I can use my target adjustment. Make sure it's turned on. I'm going to reduce the saturation of the red. Now if I completely reduce it, it'll be black and white. So I don't want to do that, but I just want to reduce it a little bit, or you can increase it. I'll reduce that, and then I'll click on his blue shirt, and I will increase the saturation on the blues. Something like that. Then I'll go ahead and go into the luminance. So luminance will either add white or black to a color. So if I add white to my oranges, you see their skin tones will start getting washed out. Again, this is just a look, a style. I'll go ahead and take my blues maybe and just darken them a little bit. So you see how the foreground is darkening? Or I'm sorry, the foreground. Pavement is just darkening a little bit. So that is another look, okay? And that was all done in HSL in the HSL panel. Now in the HSL panel, you also have a color tab, and it's basically the same thing, except that you can literally pick a color and only manipulate the hue, saturation, luminance. So you see they're already all adjusted because they're the same as here, except you're doing it by individual colors. Here we have sliders for all colors. Okay, we're going to go back to the original image again, and this time we're going to use color grading for this virtual copy. So I'll go ahead, click on Photo, and I will choose Create Virtual Copy. And again, I have another virtual copy, and this one, I'll go ahead and close all of these tabs, and I'll choose color grading. So in the color grading, we can either view it as 3 circles, or just the shadows, just the midtones, just the highlights, or global, which I would recommend not to use global because you don't have very much control over it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the 3, which are the 3 of shadow, highlight, midtone. And I'm going to go ahead and start with my shadows. So I'll click on my shadows right here, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click right in the middle of the circle and take my shadows towards the orange color. So you see, as I move into the edge of the outer circle, my color is going to be pretty intense. And then I get a little circle right here, which I can move around the color wheel and pick the exact color that I may want my shadows to be. So just for fun, let's go ahead and make my shadows kind of, yeah, maybe on the blue cyan spectrum right there. Okay. And again, I'm going to overdo it so you actually can see the color changes, but you might not want to do quite as much. It's up to you. Now, once I've done that, down below the circle, I can intensify the luminance or the density. So either make those colors even more washed out or bring in more density, and you'll see that all this blue comes up this like so. That is because I have my triangle turned on here, and it's warning me that, oops, you're not going to have any detail where this blue pops up. Now I can also turn this off, but I'm going to leave it on. And so I want it about there. Okay, and so now I'm going to look at my highlight area and make my highlights very pinkish, kind of like so. Again, it's exaggerated, but so you guys can see. Okay, and then I can wash out these highlights or add more. I'm going to wash them out a little bit, kind of go for that intense look. So I've done everything in just highlights, just shadows. I can also manipulate my midtones, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it alone. Now, I have a slider here for blending and for balance. So the blending is basically, how is this cyan blending with this orange? So if I go over to one side, it will be more orange. If I go to the other side, it should be more green. It's hard to see, but let's leave it over here for a minute. And then here's the balance. So do I want it to be more green or do I want it to be more orange? Okay, so it's either more orange or green. Why? Because I have green orange. So I'll go ahead and make it a little bit more orange, maybe like so. And then I'm going to reduce my blend. Yeah, I'm going to blend it a little bit less. Okay, so this is pretty intense, but you can see the kind of colors that we can achieve. So now once you've done that, what I'd like you guys to do is click on the very first image, then hold your shift key and click on the last variation of that image. And the quick short keyboard command to get into the survey view is the letter N. But what that means is basically going to library and clicking on the survey view right here. So it's a lot easier to do so by just being in develop, selecting the 4 images, pressing the letter N as in Nancy. There we go. And now we have all the 4 variations. This is the normal. This is the color grading. This one is the HSL. And then this one is the curve. So pick the one that you like the most and work on that one. So I like the curve, kind of the washed out look, more neutral. I'm going to pick the curve one. And now I'll go into develop module. And I will switch over to some selective adjustments. So here are the selective adjustments. This is the masking tool right here. Underneath the histogram, we have the masking tool. If I click on the mask, as you can see, some stuff was already done here. So I'm going to undo all of that. I'm going to click on this one. And so I'm going to click on this one, right click, delete. And I'm going to click on this one, right click, delete. We're going to redo that. Okay, so I don't have anything. So what is regional masking? Is basically I can choose a tool from over here, brush, linear gradient, radial, and we'll discuss the other ones a little bit later. I also have some AI tools right here. So for this lesson, we're just going to use the brush. I'm going to click on the brush. Once I clicked on the brush, I can select the size of my brush, as you can see right here. This is the size of my brush. I can also look at the softness of my brush. So if my brush is very soft at 100%, you see that there's a, let me make this brush a little smaller. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I have an inner circle and outer circle. The distance between the inner and outer circle is the softness of my brush. So let me demonstrate. I'm gonna make my exposure really, really dark, okay? Really dark. And I'm gonna paint with this brush. Click and paint. You see how soft it is. Now let's see what it does if I have a really hard brush. I'll do the same. This is a hard brush. So see the difference? Soft, hard. Now let's take a look and see what the flow does. So if I have the flow at 100%, you saw I got 100% of that darkness of exposure minus 3 stops. If I reduce my flow to a low number, let's say like 20, then if I just stroke once, I just get a little bit. If I stroke again, I get a little more. If I stroke again, I get more, and eventually I will get to the same density as it was up here. So that is flow. Now, density, notice I was at 100% density. So now I'm going to change my density to like 50%. Well, let's go 40% or so. And then I'm going to do the same. I'm going to paint, back and forth. I'm basically using my brush back and forth, back and forth. I can do this all day and I will never get to the same density as above because I limited my brush to only be at 40%. So that is the settings of these brushes. Okay, I'm going to delete everything because that was a big mess. So I'm going to choose, so I'm right clicking and deleting this brush. So now I'm back to square one. Actually, let me delete the whole thing. I'll delete the mask. Okay, here we go. Now I'm square one. I'll click on the brush. I will select the size of my brush. So what is it that I want to do? His face is a little too red. So I want to work just on his face. So I'm going to zoom into 100%. There's his face. My brush is about this big. I could make it a little bit smaller. And I do want it a little bit softer. So I'm going to increase my softness to about 50% or so, thereabout. So you see I have a brush that is kind of soft. I'm going to leave my flow at 100 for this one, leave my density at 100 for this one. And let me demonstrate what the difference is between auto mask and not auto mask. So my idea is that I want to make his face a little bit, let's say a little bit more yellow, a little bit more, less red. So I can either do it ahead of time or I can paint my mask first and then apply my adjustment. So I'll go ahead and paint my mask. So notice my auto mask is not turned on. So I'm going to go ahead and paint and look what happens. You see, it's kind of my brush. If I'm kind of sloppy about it, it touches his beard and his mustache. And then if I click in here, it's going to kind of overlap everything. It spills out. Okay. So if you don't want to spill out, a better way to do this, if you just want his skin tones, because they're different color than the hat and his beard. So I'll go ahead and do Command Z or Control Z to undo this brushing. So I've done it twice now. Click on the brush again. And here's my mask again. And so this time what I'm going to do is turn on my auto mask. And by turning on the auto mask, even though my brush is slightly on the hat, but as long as that little plus in the middle is not on the hat, it will only select his face. You see, it doesn't spill out as much. Lets me do a much better selection. And then I can just touch his lip right there. Touch in between. So you see, it kind of feathers things out for me. Okay, and I don't really want to include his eyes, so that's okay that they didn't get included. So now that I have this mask, I can turn off the mask or turn it back on with the Show Mask Overlay. I'll go ahead, actually leave it on, because as soon as I start making the adjustments, the mask will disappear. And then I can warm his skin up. I can cool his skin up. I'll warm it up a little bit, so I want it to be a little bit more yellow. And I want to desaturate his skin a little bit, like so. Okay, so to me that looks a little bit better. I'm also going to increase, or rather darken the shadows a little bit. So this is really light shadows, this is darker shadows. And I'm going to give him a little bit more texture because he's kind of an older dude. He could use some texture. So I'm going to add some texture to him and I'll give him a little bit more definition. So I'm doing all of this just on his face. Let's say I want to work on her face. I'll go ahead and click on Create New Mask. Choose Brush. Repeat the process just for her. I'm holding the space bar, so therefore I can move over to her face. I'll have the auto mask still turned on, and I'll go ahead, create a mask on her. Notice her eyes got selected. I'm not going to worry about it because I'm going to take care of that in just a second. I'll show you how. So you get the idea. I'm not going to paint all of her, but let's just say I got this part. Okay, so now I did not want, let me get her edges a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so I did not want to paint on her eyes. So this is mask number 2. I can also rename it, and I can call it Woman. So I know what I'm working on. So there she is. And I can click on Subtract. Use a brush for subtraction. Okay, take a much smaller brush and erase her eyes out because I don't want them to change. Erase her eyes, erase her mouth. Now notice that the mask is red and her mouth is red. So what we could do is click on the mask options over here, overlay options, and select the color green so we can see it better. And then I can always return it back to red if I want to. So this way I can see exactly where her lips are and erase just them and her mouth. So now she is like Mr. Hulk here. She's green. Maybe take out her eyebrows if I want to. So. And now I'm going to adjust her skin tone. So I'll go ahead and make her a little bit warmer. Not this warm, not this cool, but just a little bit warmer. And maybe bring out her highlights. Just a little bit, not too much, don't overdo it. I'm overdoing it a little bit so you guys can see it on the video. And then I'll go ahead and darken her shadows, for example. Okay. And magenta or a little green. I'll just add a smidge of green. Just like so. Okay. And if I click on Fit, or I can hold my command minus, I can zoom out, or control minus on PC, or zoom back in. And you will notice that I have these brushes. So if I hover over a brush, it will show me what was painted. Because I'm on her mask. If I click on his mask, which I did not rename, but he also has a brush right here, and that's what was done to him. Okay, so that was a quick lesson in brush masking. We will explore all the other tools as well a little bit later on.